Welcome to session number 27 of an Introduction to Biblical Prophecy. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and the Philippines and some here in the U.S. And we're also likely to be joined later by uh, people online watching through YouTube or Facebook. Today, we're going to continue this study with continued details in the book of Revelation. I can't emphasize too much that Revelation cannot be properly understood without the Old Testament prophets, particularly Daniel, and to some extent, very large extent, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. The Old Testament lays the foundation, and the connections are important. One of the greatest errors that scholars and commentators make with the book of Revelation is to take it out of its Old Testament context. The book does not quote often from the Old Testament, but it everywhere makes what we call allusions. It assumes the background of the Old Testament, particularly the book of Daniel. So today we're going to get into the first of the great sevens of the 70th week of Daniel. The sevens and 70s and weeks and whatnot are not arbitrary. This speaks of a 7-year period that forms the transition from the church age to the millennial kingdom. It includes the introduction of the Antichrist. It includes the judgment on the unbelieving world, a massive conversion of both Gentiles and Jews prior to a climactic battle and the second coming of Christ. This is a major time, and it's a 7-year period that fits between the church age and the millennial kingdom. And the sevens of this period are the key to understanding it. There's a lot of details in this section that I believe are deliberately obscure. Okay, who is the rider on the white horse? The simple answer is we don't know. we can call we assume that he fulfills Daniel's prophecy of a willful king who worships a god of armies and fortresses, who stands opposed to every god. New Testament theologians call him the Antichrist. And that may or may not be a good name, but it's what theologians have chosen. This man of sin that Paul speaks of in the Thessalonian epistles is a warrior and a thoroughly corrupt politician attempting to build a global empire. And that doesn't make him unique. There have been lots of these all through history, which is why we never want to get caught identifying the Antichrist with one particular politician. Virtually all of them would jump at the chance to be the Antichrist. God has been setting up his program and moving it along at his rate. Satan doesn't know what's happening, and so has always had half a dozen antichrists in his pocket that he could use whenever he needed to. When we see those characteristics come up in human leaders, evil corrupt, venal, arbitrary human leaders who want to put together a totalitarian state, um, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that this has got to be the one because we particularly don't like him. But it's the fact is that we don't know, and Satan doesn't know, and it's Satan's business to cultivate and to mentor and to groom an antichrist. But he's always had one. He's always had several. And now in the world, there are, it seems like a superfluity. We have more antichrist candidates than you can shake a stick at. So as we walk through this, remember the principle of deliberate obscurity. Uh, the prophecies, when fulfilled, will be obvious. We'll look at what happened in history and we'll say to ourselves, "Oh, that was it." we we should have seen it coming. But the fact is, God hasn't designed prophecy so that we can see it coming. And there are many signs in today's world that could well be the signs of the end time. I won't deny that. But whether they are enough of a sign to, sell your house and go stand together on the top of a hill in white robes, that I'm not ready to say. So we're going to launch into this. Let's share the screen and we'll start where we left off last time. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, let's see here. See if I can make this happen. Yep. Here we go. And we'll stop and then start it again by sharing this one. Okay. What we want to deal with, first of all, this is in really an overview of chapters 5 through 19, the seven seals, seven trumpets, seven personages, different kinds of people type characters, and then the final seven bowl judgments. These 4 sevens are the major events of the 7-year tribulation period, or the 70th week of Daniel. The 7 seals appear to cover the entire 7 years. From my point of view, the 7 trumpets are unfolded by the 7th seal. So we get the 6 seals, then a 7th is opened, and that unfolds or introduces the 7 trumpets. The beginning point of the 7 trumpets is very hard to nail down. Different commentators put it at different places. Some like it to be sequential, so that the first 7 are followed by the second 7, followed by the third 7, followed by the fourth. And it doesn't work very well. Some like to stagger these, backing up each one a bit. In my viewpoint, the 7th seal contains the 7 trumpets, and the beginning point of the 7 trumpets is most likely no earlier than the halfway point of the 7-year period. The 7 personages don't fit into the 70th week very well at all. In fact, this sequence of the book seems to speak of God and Satan in their um, conflict throughout all of history. But we'll talk about that more when we get there, several weeks. The seven bowls are the final seven climactic judgments. They happen right at the end. They include things like the so-called Battle of Armageddon, and they lead right up to the second coming of Christ. So that's that vertical arrow that you see on the right-hand side. Following the second coming of Christ, there's a 1,000-year kingdom on earth for those who have survived the 70th week. The dead in Christ from the period of the 70th week will go up into heaven. They won't go into the millennium. Uh, there is some there's conversation amongst scholars, sometimes violent conversation, about whether or not the church will be present during the millennial kingdom. My opinion is that the church will be in heaven by that time, and that it's fairly unlikely that we will be sent back for duty or service on earth, but we could be. Some Christians may be chosen as governors or rulers by Christ during the 1,000-year millennial kingdom, but the occupants, the inhabitants of the millennial kingdom, will be mortal men and women. They will marry, they will have children, they will get old and die. They will be born with a sin nature and need salvation, just like everyone else always has. And at the end, a good portion of them will rebel against Christ. So the millennium is not perfection on earth. It is a perfect human kingdom over continuing sinful men. And it's a final demonstration that apart from the grace of God responded to by faith, there is no salvation. Following the millennium, there is this last conflict, and then the heaven and earth pass away, and a new heaven and earth is created, a new Jerusalem, and eternity begins. All of the judgments happen, and then eternity begins. Uh, Actually, eternity continues in the way of things. But that's where we are. And I will probably come back to this slide repeatedly. So this is the background is a photograph from a film about the Vietnam War called Apocalypse Now. And I find it good for a lot of apocalyptic images, lots of reds and browns and unhappy looking people with helicopters and fighter planes and whatnot. So the seven seals occupy the territory from 5:1 to 8:1. We've looked at a bit of the introduction in chapter 5, 1 through 14. We see um, the scene in heaven, uh, continuing from chapter 4, where we saw the elders and the throne of God and the angels and thunder and lightning in background, and God offering up the scroll with seven seals, and an angel asking if there's anyone worthy. And finally, we see the introduction of Christ as the one who is worthy to open the seven seals. And it's very important. I think one of the most important concepts in the book that, in fact, repeats what we've seen elsewhere in the New Testament, that the only person who has the standing to judge the heavens and earth must be the creator. Anyone with less authority than the creator cannot be the judge. And by the same token, anyone with less authority than the creator and the judge cannot be the redeemer. The identity of the creator, the king and judge, and the redeemer has to be the same person. So Christ is identified as the king of creation, the judge of all the earth, and the redeemer of men. This is one of the most important bits of argument that led to our understanding of the nature of the Trinity and the nature of Christ. Christ has to be perfectly God. He has to have all of the attributes of God, and at the same time, all of the attributes of man. Uh, this was hard to hammer out thousands of years ago, and it occupied roughly 400 years of church history, coming to grips with this Christ who walked among us, died for sin, and was resurrected. It was a hard thing, and hard fought argument all the way through that. So, in the last bits of chapter 5 is what I'm going to look at now in verses 11 through 14, as we see the angels joining in worship, and 5:11. And I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures, and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." And every created thing which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all things in them, I heard saying, "To him who sits on the throne, to the Lamb, be blessing and honor and glory and dominion forever and ever." So he is the King. He is worthy of praise, and he is the only one withstanding to perform judgment on the earth, because he is the Redeemer. And the four living creatures kept saying, "Amen." And the elders, of course, fell down and worshiped, which is their primary job. So we walk off into chapter 6, and Christ begins to break seals. All of the sevens have a similar pattern. There is a sequence of 4 that seem to fit together and are usually mentioned quickly. There is a sequence of 2, which are generally different from one another and different from the first 4, and are emphasized by length. Then there is an interlude, a quiet moment, followed by the 7th in the sequence. So a 4, a 2, and a 1. Some commentators say that we're to understand this as a 6 and a 1. I take it just a little farther because it seems so obvious that what we have is the first 4 seals, and then the next 2 seals, then an interlude, and then a 7th seal. And this is going to work also for trumpets, personages, and bowls. It's a literary device that builds emphasis. So And at the same time, it's also talking about something that's really happening. Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say in a loud voice, a voice of thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer. Okay, these four horses have all have a relationship to war. The red horse is widespread war. The third horse, the black horse, is famine. The final horse, the pale horse, is death. And all of these are going to work together to create catastrophe on the earth. So the white horse has a rider with a bow. Uh, we notice that he's not using a lance or a sword. Those would both be used at close distances. A bow facilitates war at a distance, and we're not sure exactly why. This is so. Perhaps it's because this Antichrist character, the rider on the white horse, uh, is going to be constantly at war, but it will not be him fighting. He has a bow, uh, so it will be his proxies, his minions, his orcs, if you will, going out and actually fighting the battles. Uh, the crown is the right to rule, and this is true whether that rule is legitimate or not. Some have said that the crown always represents the legitimate right to rule. There have been lots of illegitimate kings, and while they have the crown, they can rule, even though they are illegitimate. And modern politicians are no different. It is very common for uh, worldwide known politicians of various stripes to take power illegitimately. Backroom deals done by a bunch of people with a lot of money to spend on politics. Um, and what happens? A whole lot of bad things. But that's not uncommon. And just because we see a corrupt politician doesn't mean that he's the Antichrist. Uh, like I say, there are plenty of them. We're told that he is conquering and to conquer. His reign, such as it is on the earth, will be composed of one war after another in various places. And again, this is not terribly unusual. Many kings and rulers and politicians like to keep some wars going because it's good for business. I know that sounds awfully cynical, but many of the wars that have happened uh, just in the last 200 to 300 years have been absolutely senseless. There was no good reason for the Franco-Prussian War or for the Crimean War or for World War I. Is one of the stupidest wars that's ever happened. It should not have happened. It's a bunch of politicians who felt that if everybody else was going to go to war, they really should too. And none of them had a good reason to go to war. And it was a catastrophe, a terrible thing. The Second World War is the same thing. There was no good reason for it. But politicians often look for wars because it allows for the rapid development of the size of government, for the budgets of the defense industry. As of course, uh, politicians are kept in office by the very large donors who give lots of money to make sure that their people get in office. And the big donors are often in favor of endless war. So that's always been true. That's always been true. That doesn't mean that all of these politicians are the Antichrist, but one of them will be. One of these days, that's going to be him. The wars will not end. There doesn't seem to be a victory. It would be wrong to conclude that the Antichrist sets up a functioning global government. Uh, I know that it's popular um, in the prophecy literature to speak of some kind of United Nations thing, some some kind of a global government put together by the United Nations as the Antichrist government. But I don't see that. The United Nations may well be involved in all of this. There are an awful lot of very corrupt people in the United Nations, and, but they won't succeed in producing a worldwide government. There will always be rebels. They may be scattered. They may be in small enclaves in various places. I mean, the Pampanga province may be the only holdout in the Philippines and that kind of thing. But there will never be an end to the wars of Antichrist. And his final war is the Battle of Armageddon itself. So the entire 7 years will be characterized by this politically motivated, one world government producing warfare and the Antichrist in the middle of it. The rider of the white horse can really only be identified as the man of sin, as Paul calls him, or the willful king of Daniel. Theologians have called him the Antichrist. He is a human political ruler. He probably comes from a Muslim background, but is very likely not a practicing Muslim. The one world religion of the end may have some relationship to Islam, but that's not clear. The Antichrist himself, probably not a practicing Muslim. Uh, he may be a Muslim of convenience because by that time, Islam will be a very popular thing. Something that we've noticed just lately is the uh, increasing sympathy of the world for the so-called Palestinian people. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people. They are Arabic-speaking peoples from a wide variety of origin countries, mostly in the Middle East, in North Africa and the Middle East. And they really they've had multiple chances to put states together, and they simply haven't done it. They don't want a state. They want to kill Jews. They want to destroy. The word Hamas in Arabic means an evil thing, a corrupt thing, or a destruction. I think destruction is probably most likely the intention of those who gave it this name. Um, they don't want to build anything good. They want to destroy what exists. And I honestly can't see a Hamas type movement at the core of the final battles. And the reason I say that is because ever since October 7th, when the Gaza and Hamas terrorists killed and mutilated and raped and pillaged their way into Israel, starting this most recent war in Israel, there have been protest groups all over the world, literally all over the world, capitals all over the world, very large numbers of people protesting Israel's retaliation against this terrorist group. It is common sense will tell you that any nation of decent people is going to have to respond to an attack like Hamas did. And yet we find literally millions of people all over the world protesting very loudly and often very violently that the Jews need to be eradicated. There needs to be another Holocaust so that the Palestinian people who have never wanted a state can have their own state from the river to the sea. This is an irrational hatred. Seems to be a theme of the end time. So I would call the writer of the White Horse the Antichrist. He's a leader of the end time who will be peculiarly satanically empowered to accomplish a great deal toward the building of an Islamic favorable one world state. He won't succeed, but he'll try. So that makes him a very interesting character. The red horse, as we see in the next seal, the second seal, he broke the second seal. I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And another, a red horse, went out. And to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. A sword is a particular kind of weapon that is intended to be used in close quarters combat. The red horse is the rather gruesome specter of the battlefield itself. The white horse shows a great general stroke politician commanding his armies in various parts of the world to do their job. The red horse shows the wars themselves, the battlefield combat, the exploding tanks, the burning soldiers, the dead civilians. This is the picture of the red horse. So he's got a great sword, and he's ready to go out and do his worst. The third seal to be opened is a black horse. He broke it, and the third living creature saying, "Come," and I looked, and behold, a black horse. He who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Pair of scales. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." Okay, so wheat, barley, oil, and wine are the 4 staples of the Middle Eastern diet. These are things that just belong in virtually every meal. And the prices that are laid on these are extremely high. This speaks of scarcity and inflation. The result of all of that is famine. During a war, one of the terrible things that results from a war, whether you're on the on the side of the good guys or the bad guys. A war is a terrible, terrible thing. Uh, Nobody who has ever seen a battlefield wants to see another. It's only young, crazy people and corrupt politicians who want more wars. The mature people who've been there never want to go back. And one of the worst things about a war is the starvation, the famine, uh, the local people, civilians, who've had their farms burned, who've had their cities destroyed, who've had their industry crushed, who have no place to work, no way of earning a living, and nothing to buy if they had it. This is a terrible thing, and in most wars in the past several hundred years, the largest losers have been the civilians, ordinary people who just want to survive, and yet have suffered in these things. Okay, scarcity bleeds or breeds inflation in the prices of food and therefore famine. Millions of people will starve. And then we finally see the fourth beast. The Lamb broke the fourth seal. The fourth living creature says, "Come." And I looked, and behold, an ashen horse. Okay, ashen or pale or dappled gray, whatever. And he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him, and authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by the wild beasts of the earth. So war, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts. So some will die directly in the war. Uh, a hero's death, if you will, uh, riding their tank into battle and get blown up, uh, which I suppose is a tough way to go. Famine, though, is worse. Women and children and the civilians starving to death. That follows right behind. The uh, accompaniment is pestilence. Pestilence is various kinds of plagues and epidemics. The famine will cause um, a weakening of the immune systems of people where the wars have happened, and that will be just about everywhere. So there'll be widespread death from disease, all kinds of diseases, things that haven't been a problem for centuries will be back, and people will die of these things. And while all of this is happening, wild beasts, uh, wolves and mountain lions, bears, tigers, and who knows what, crocodiles, snakes will come out into the places that are being abandoned by the armies, and will eat the dead bodies, will attack living people, and death will be uh, sometimes violent, sometimes slow and painful, but extraordinarily widespread. So as we get into the four horsemen, this is this is not a pretty picture. This is in fact a really really evil thing. The fact that uh, these characters, these four horsemen, have many examples in the modern world and in recent history, uh, shouldn't make us think that it's not still going to get worse. Because that's the picture here. At the end time, these things will be worse than they were. In all of the world's wars for the past 2,000 years, there has been a Christian attempt at moderation. It was Christians building on Greco-Roman philosophy who invented the concept of a just war. Now, a war is a terrible thing anyway, whether it's just or unjust, it doesn't matter. But the church tried to moderate things. The church tried to invent an attitude that we call chivalry during the Middle Ages, where soldiers only fight other soldiers, and they don't make war against women and children. They protect women and children. So you get stories of uh, 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 the King Arthur and the Round Table, Charlemagne and his mighty knights, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the various medieval stories that grew up around the notions of honor and godliness, fair play, a fair fight on the battlefield, all that sort of thing. In the modern era, it's been Christians who have at the first supplied hospitals and the first battlefield nursing. Florence Nightingale during, I believe, the Franco-Prussian War. Prior to that, people who died or who were injured on the battlefield simply died of their wounds. It was Christians who tried to come up with ways of helping. That's what the Red Cross is all about, or used to be, was supposed to be. A Christian response to this. With the church gone at the time of the Four Horses, the war will simply be unlimited. There will be no mitigation. There will be no easing. So these four, all by themselves, if there was no additional information to be had from the book of Revelation, this would be bad. This would be something we would want to avoid. This is a terrible thing. But as they say in the TV commercials, we're not through yet. The fifth seal is opened up, and this is a fascinating thing. It's actually somewhat controversial. So let me see if I can open this up for you. And the Lamb broke the fifth seal, and what we're going to see here is a real break from the first four. The first four obviously go together, four horses, and you can see all four horses coming at the same time. But the fifth seal is different. And I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each of them a white robe. And they were told that they should rest for a little while longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed also. Okay, so these folks are martyrs. And there's some discussion. Some commentators think this is martyrs strictly from the tribulation period, which is a good possibility. There's a good argument for that position. Others have argued that this is martyrs from the entire church age, going all the way back to Stephen, right after Pentecost. And there's also a good argument for that. These martyrs under the altar are calling for retribution against those who have persecuted them. and specifically for the complete pouring out of wrath on the um, inhabitants of the earth, who will at that time be going through the tribulation period. Now, one of the really interesting things that I've discovered by wandering around in Europe, looking at old churches, is that the Catholic Church traditionally has assumed that these martyrs are the martyrs of the very early church, or the first 300 years of the church, was characterized by widespread persecution and lots of martyrs. And the early official saints of the Catholic Church are the martyrs. And tradition is, if a Catholic Church wants to build a permanent altar, like this one that we see in this is Bourges Cathedral in France, and what you see in the background, kind of shadowy there, is the great altar, the high altar of the church. Underneath that altar, there is some relic of the namesake. And in Bourges, this is Our Lady of something or other of Bourges. And so there is something, some relic, a piece of the mourning veil of Mary, or the or a small vial of the mother's milk of Mary, something under the altar, in order for it to be a permanent stone altar in a church. It's got to have a relic. And so, if today you wanted to build a Catholic church and uh, name it after some saint, let's say you want Saint Fred's Cathedral, you'd have to have a relic of Saint Fred in order to have a permanent altar. Many modern Catholic churches uh, name themselves something, All Saints or whatever, and they don't have a relic, and so they have a temporary altar. That's why you sometimes see a hardwood or metal altar in a modern Roman Catholic church. If they have a stone altar, then there's going to be an actual relic, a bone, a fingernail, some hair, something under the altar. And Catholics point to this chapter as the reason for that. Uh, and for Roman Catholics, in general, their eschatology says that the book of Revelation is a prediction of those Roman persecutions on the church, and that it was fulfilled hundreds and hundreds of years ago. There is no end time coming, no 70th week. None of this is going to be a future event. I take this as a future event, and I take many of these martyrs certainly as coming out of the tribulation, and many more will join them before the 70th week is concluded. From there, we go on into the sixth seal, and this is the ultimate catastrophe. And whether this is an earthquake or not, or not an earthquake, but a nuclear explosion or not, is anybody's guess. It could be if we were to have the Battle of Armageddon today. I suppose that there would be nations on the earth who would feel justified in using nuclear weapons. Can't tell you, but the description that we see here is terrifying enough. I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. Okay, every shaking everywhere, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. Celestial catastrophe, earthquake, a black sun, because of the clouds of dust rising, the red moon, of course, because of the redness of the fires below and the moon shining through the smoke. Uh, and then we're told the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. Okay, stars falling to earth. Uh, Probably isn't a literal thing, because a star, by definition, is a gigantic mass of hydrogen and helium undergoing a nuclear reaction, a fusion reaction. Uh, and a single star is many tens of thousands of times larger than the Earth. Stars don't fall to Earth. When we speak of a falling star, we're talking about a meteorite, a rock from space falling through the atmosphere and glowing to incandescent. Some commentators have said there's an uncanny resemblance between shooting stars, falling meteorites, and the reentry vehicles used by nuclear weapons that are being dropped from space. So if a ballistic missile sends half a dozen nuclear warheads at a distant city, those warheads will split off from the missile and uh, target independently. They call this a MIRV, independently targetable reentry vehicles that come down in different places, steered by GPS or whatever they're using. As they come through the atmosphere, they'll glow red hot, and they'd look like shooting stars. In modern uh, combat with missiles, um, Israel versus Hamas, we've seen the Iron Dome engage the incoming uh, uh, ballistic missiles from Hamas in Gaza, and it looks like falling stars being shot by beams of light. The two missiles hitting each other like a pair of bullets. And this is the picture, I believe. Now, if the events that we're talking about wait another 1,000 years, they may have invented even better technology to kill all of us. Who knows? But it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Stars falling from heaven like ripe figs. And then the sky was split apart like a scroll uh, when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. When a nuclear uh, weapon detonates, the shock wave causes all of these things to happen. The sky seems to unroll like a scroll, and everything is moved out of its place. An entire city can be knocked down. It's a genuinely terrible thing. Now, I say that just to say that the technology exists right now to produce the kinds of effects that are described in this passage. God can do even worse. If he chooses to, he can destroy the earth in a way that is even more intense, even more frightening. So I'm not necessarily predicting a nuclear end to the world. I actually don't know, but the technology to do this actually exists. And then one of my favorite parts of the whole thing is that the kings of the earth, this is 6 and verse 15, the kings of the earth, the global elite, the ruling class worldwide, the great men and the commanders, and the rich and the strong, and also every slave and free man. But you notice the elite rulers are begging for mercy. They hid themselves in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, and they said to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us, hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb." Okay, this this entire sequence of events is related. All of this horrible stuff is the outworking of the wrath of God. It's really, really important. And the world elite, the ruling class who have survived up to this point, will face this and realize that they were wrong. They've been lied to. They need to get away. They need to hide from this great power whose wrath is now revealed against them. This would be a really, really bad place to be in. Uh, and the great day of wrath has come. Who is able to stand? And the answer, of course, is nobody can stand for this. It's over. This is the end of the game, and those who have caused this catastrophe, who have built a world system that requires the judgment of God, will never take responsibility, but God will hold them to account. And that's what this picture is. So as we come to the sixth seal, really what we're looking at is the very end, the climax of the 70th week. This is the Battle of Armageddon. And as we get a little further along, I want to talk about that concept a little more. We're going to make some connections to the Old Testament. But for now, let's just think of the Battle of Armageddon as this concluding confrontation between God and the forces of evil that control the world. God will be avenged, and this is what it looks like. Now, following this sixth seal, we have what I call an interlude or a parenthesis, where we're going to see some other things happening. This is going to take place in chapter 7. So we get into chapter 7, we're going to be introduced to 144,000 and a mixed multitude and a lot of details. And it doesn't seem to fit into a sequence. And the fact is, the first 6 scrolls are not necessarily in any particular sequence. This is all a picture of the wrath of God on an unbelieving world, uh, with the good news that some will be saved out of this. A significant number of people will turn to Christ during the tribulation period, and we'll meet them in heaven. I suspect their stories will be interesting. Okay, I'm going to quit there. We're going to hit this again next week. Let's see here. Yeah. Oh, no, I don't want to mute everybody. That's even worse. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and let me see if I can make this stop. Yeah, we'll stop the sharing. Okay. Um, Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate seeing you all. And we'll come back again next week and go a little further into this book of Revelation. It's a fascinating thing, although it's also a very frightening thing. The Battle of Armageddon is something that we want to hope not to face. It'd be better if we didn't have to. But it's something that is definitely coming. It's coming on the world because of the world's unbelief. And one day we will, in fact, see this played out. And I recommend that if you know anybody who's not ready for that, you share Christ with him. There is a way out, and Christ is the way. We have the answer to this problem. It's just a question of the will to get that answer out to those who need to hear. More and more, we're going to find people are concerned about what's happening in the world and wondering what to do about it. And the answer is trust Christ. Everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. That's the message. And the perish part is a particularly frightening end. And we don't want that for anyone. That's why we share the gospel. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you guys. And we'll see you again next week. And let's see. Oscar, are you still there, Oscar? I see you there somewhere. Yeah.
Yes.
Stick around for let's get together on FaceTime. Go
Okay.
ahead and call us in just a minute or two, and we'll see when
Okay.
another good time would be to get together with you and Sally. Okay, let's
Okay. Okay.
you call us and we'll join you in just a few minutes. Okay, bye
Okay.
bye everybody. Love
Bye.
y'all. Bye bye.
Ciao a tutti.